Guys, in the previous session, we have discussed about what? What is a tightly coupled objects and what is loosely coupled objects? Correct. Right. In the previous class, I told about what is called tightly coupled objects and what is called loosely coupled objects. Okay. Right? So for that, we discussed about there are some rules to follow to provide loose coupling between the objects. So today we are going to, of course, I have written yesterday, I mean in the last session, um, a small example to understand about how loose coupling can be provided. So today we are going to look at about what is a dependency lookup and what is called dependency injection, what is called inversion of control. So these terms I'm going to explain, and who is called spring container. So these kind of things we are going to look at in the session for today. In today's class, we are going to understand all these things. Okay, let's start with that. You can switch on the fan, but keep it in 2 or okay. So have you remembered what are the rules to follow to provide loose coupling between two objects? If I want to provide loose coupling between two objects, what are the rules to be followed? In the last class, I told about them, right? So did you guys remembered about what are the rules to be followed? Suppose if I want to provide loose coupling between two objects, what are the rules to be followed if I want to provide loose coupling between two objects? Is my question. So dependency classes must implement the interface. Next. We need to create a interface reference variable in the dependent class as a data member. Next. In the class, dependent class, we need to define a constructor or a setter method for injecting the dependency object. Am I right? Okay. It is killing our time. I am already late. Again, this is late. We need to find a solution for this. Yeah, just a minute, guys. Online paper. Okay. Now I can see. These are the rules to follow to provide loose coupling between the objects. Okay. In the previous class, I told there is a tight coupling between objects and there is a loose coupling between objects. Okay. So to provide loose coupling between objects, the dependency classes must implement an interface. in the dependent class, create an interface reference variable as a data member. Third, in the dependent class, define a constructor or a setter method for injecting the dependency object. Right? So, as an example, just as an example, I have created what? An interface. As an example, I have created what? An interface. Done. See, as an example, I have created first one class called as travel. Just for example, I took the class called as what? Travel. Okay, right? Travel is one class. Now, what I took here in travel class, I took reference of vehicle. Reference of vehicle. Vehicle, vehicle. This is what I have written. Vehicle is an interface, right? Now, this is called what type of reference variable? Interface reference variable is created as a data member, correct? Now, I told define either constructor or a setter method. For example, I want to define a constructor. How can I able to define the constructor? Public. Okay. Okay. Suppose let's start with the setter. How can we define the setter method for this variable? Public void. If a variable name is vehicle, setter method is what? Set vehicle. If a variable name is vehicle, setter method is what? Set vehicle. Vehicle, vehicle. Am I right or not? So what I can write here, this dot vehicle is equal to vehicle. This is a way of defining setter method. It is a way to define the setter method for a variable called vehicle, right? If variable name is vehicle, then setter method is what? Set vehicle, correct? Now, next. Okay, next. Somebody is trying to speak to me. Not uploaded. Okay, see here, guys. So basically what I'm trying to say now, there is a setter method. This is the way how you people can able to define the setter method for a variable. Am I clear with that now? Right, now let's go ahead. See here. And of course, not only setter method, even your class may contain other methods, constructors, whatever. If you want getter methods, you can define the getter methods. All other methods can be there in the class called travel. Now, this is one point I told in the last class. Now, okay, now this is vehicle. Now, I have created an interface called what here? Vehicle. Interface vehicle is there in my application. Vehicle is my interface. Okay, there are some abstract methods in the vehicle interface. There is a class implementation class. Car implements a vehicle. Now, these are the methods that are overridden here. Next, I have one more class. The class name is bike, which also implements vehicle. Now, here also some methods are written, overridden in the class. So, there are two classes here actually. I mean, there are multiple classes here actually, but in that we need to identify who is called a dependent class and who are called a dependency class. Oh, correct. Now, travel is called which type of class? Dependent class. Okay, implementations of vehicle. Implementation classes of vehicle interface are going to become what type of classes? Dependency classes. Dependency classes, right? Now, in the dependent class, are you manually creating, or this class is manually creating the object, the dependency class object directly inside the class? No. If it creates the dependency class object inside the class itself, It is going to become what type of coupling? Tight coupled objects. What type of coupling? Tight coupled objects. So, but we are not creating the object of dependency class directly in the dependent class, right? Good. We took a interface reference variable. Okay, interface reference variable can store what? In interface reference variable, what we can store? We can assign the implementation class object to the interface reference variable. What we can assign? Implementation class object to the interface reference variable. Who are the implementation classes here? Car and bike. Now tell me, suppose now the travel is a dependent object. Now it wants to use car as a dependency object. Then tell me, by calling the setter method, which object I can assign? Car object. Suppose in future the same travel object, but now it wants to change the dependency from car object to bike object. Again, by calling the setter method, dependency can be changed or not without making any changes in the code. Which code? Dependent class. Without making any changes in the dependent object, can we able to change the dependency object? Yes. Now this is called what type of coupling between the objects? Loose coupling between the objects. So for example, I have a main class here. So first of all, let us add who is the dependent class and who are the dependency classes. Now I can say that who is the dependent class here? Travel. Travel is a what type of class? Dependent class. So let us add a travel is a dependent class. This is the dependent class. This is the dependent class, correct? Now, okay, now there are car is one class. Car is a class. So tell me this car, we call it as what type of class? Dependency class.
Dependency.
Which class? Dependency class. Just I will drag it to this place. Now this class, we can call it as what type of class? Dependency class. Next, this bike is also, we can call it as what type of class only? Dependency class. That is also dependency class. This bike is also one dependency class. I'll keep an arrow. This is also called as a dependency class. Now tell me, this car and bike, both are called as what type of classes? This car and bike both are called as what type of classes? These are called as dependency classes. Now this is one dependency class. This is another dependency class. And this vehicle is travel is called what type of class? Dependent class. Okay, right. Now let me start writing main class. Suppose I am writing one main class, public class main. Now in this class main, I am creating the public static void main method with the parameters string, array, args parameter. Correct? String, array, args parameter. Now inside this, what I'm trying to do actually, first I'm creating the travel object. Travel is equal to new travel. Nothing but which class object I'm creating? Dependent class object I'm creating. But now this dependent class wants to use car as a dependency object. Which object it wants to use as a dependency object now? Car. Tell me, by calling this method called set vehicle, can I able to set the car object to the travel object? Travel is a what type of object? Dependent object. Now it wants to use which object as a dependency object? Car. So can I able to set the car object to the travel object by calling this method called set vehicle? Yes, I can do that. So how can I do that? Travel dot setter method is set vehicle of new car. New car means what we are creating? Object. New means creating an object. We are creating the object of which class? Car. It is a dependency class. Now you tell me who is a dependent object and who is a dependency object here? Here, who is a dependent object? Who is a dependency object? Travel is dependent object. Travel is a dependent object. Okay. Car is dependency object. Yes, car is dependency object. Okay. Now, next. Suppose, assume that now the travel wants to change to bike. Travel is a dependent object. Now it wants to use another dependency object. Who is other dependency object now? Bike. Now you tell me, do I need to make any changes in the code? Do I need to make any changes in the dependent object code? No. Who is a dependent object here? Travel. Do I need to make any changes now? No. In tight coupling, we have to. In tight coupling, we have to make the changes. But in loose coupling, without making any code changes. No code changes are required. I told in my definition, without making any code changes. Now you tell me what I'm writing here. Travel dot, what I'm writing? Set vehicle of new bike. Without making any code changes, now you tell me travel is what object now? Dependent object. Travel is dependent object. Bike is dependency object. Bike is dependency object. Now, without making any code changes, what I can do now? Without making any code changes, a dependent object can change the dependency object or not? Yes. Now, this is called, what type of coupling is there between the dependent object and its dependency object? Loose coupling is there between the two objects. Okay. So, when we can say that objects are called tightly coupled objects, here I'm going to add a comment here, without any code changes, without any code changes in the dependent object, without any code changes in the dependent object, the dependency object is changed. This is called what type of coupling? Loose coupling. This is called loose coupling. This is how you need to understand about what is called tightly coupled objects and what is called loosely coupled objects. Without making any code changes in the dependent object, the dependency object is changed. First, what is the dependency object we are arranging or we are assigning? By calling the statement or by writing, when the statement is executed, who is the dependent object? Travel. And who is the dependency object? Car. By the second statement, what is happening? For the same dependent object, but who is changed? Dependency object is changed without making any code changes. Now, this is called what type of coupling between the two objects? Loose coupling between the two objects. This is called loose coupling. This is what in the last class we have discussed. The same thing which I have explained in the last class. Now, today, I just want to keep this diagram for you so that you people can able to refer it. I want to insert this picture into our document. Just a minute. Okay, now I can keep everything in one picture. Okay, I'll insert this picture here so that you guys can refer the example, at least to understand about how it is called loose coupling. Okay, that's enough now. Now coming to, this is all in the last class only. I've explained to you. Okay, right? Now, okay, anyhow, in further multiple examples I'm going to talk. At the time of talking our code, then I'm going to show you whether it is called tightly coupled objects or whether it is called loosely coupled objects, right? Good. We are going to look at about. So generally at the time of writing, applications which are related to, even from beginning only, we are going to see the dependence injection, but mostly at the time of writing web applications, REST APIs, we are going to create a controller class, we are going to create a service class, we are going to create a repository. So then we are going to have a dependency called controller depends on service, service depends on repository, repository depends on template. So like that, we are going to write multiple levels or layers of dependency injection. Dependencies. So that we are going to discuss at the time of working with the examples. Now, at least you got an idea called what is really called a tightly coupled objects and what is really called loosely coupled objects. Okay. So I've given definition what when a dependent object wants to change its dependency object, if code changes are required in the dependent object, then we can say that the dependent object is tightly coupled with the dependency object. Am I right or not? Right. So here the same example we took. Oh, correct. Here we are directly creating what object? Car object. Okay. Now, for example, you want to change to bike object, then code changes are required or not? Yes. This is called what type of couple? There is a tight coupling between what and what dependent object and its a dependency object. Now, we want to discuss about loose coupling. So when a dependent object wants to change its dependency object, if no code changes are required in the dependent object, then we say that the dependent object is loosely coupled with the dependent. But to provide loose coupling between the dependent and its dependency objects, what are the rules to follow? Dependency classes must implement an interface, and in the dependent class, create an interface reference variable as a data member. And in the third rule is what? In the dependent class, we define a constructor, a setter method for injecting the dependency. You look at all the three rules are implemented or not. First of all, these are called which classes? Dependency. Dependency classes must implement an interface. Yes, rule number one is satisfied. Rule number two. What's the rule number two? This is rule number one, right? This is a rule number two. What's the rule number two? Create a interface reference variable as a data member. So this is rule number two. Rule number three is what? Define either a constructor or a setter method. Of course, what I have defined here? Setter method. Now this is called rule number three. So all the rules are satisfied here? Yes, very good. Now coming to the point. Now we need to understand, okay, we need to understand what is called inversion of control and what is called dependency injection. Next, what is called dependency lookup. What is called dependency injection? What is called dependency lookup? And first of all, before that, we need to understand a word called as what is called IOC. IOC stands for inversion of control. Okay. So what is the meaning of inversion of control? I'll tell you. See, for example, first of all, okay. For example, first of all, let's have a discussion here. So actually, I'm going to talk about a word called as IOC. IOC stands for what? Inversion of control. Okay. So what is the meaning of inversion of control? The name only saying inversion of control. But we need to properly understand what is the meaning of inversion of control. We want to understand that. Okay. And also next we are going to understand about what is called dependency injection. Today we are going to look at about all these terminology. What is the terminology? Inversion of control, dependency injection, dependency lookup. These are the things I'm going to explain. Dependency injection, in shortcut we call it DI. Dependency lookup we call in shortcut DL. What is dependency injection? What is dependency lookup? How we can differentiate them? And before that, first of all, we need to understand about what is the meaning of inversion of control. Okay. See, to understand what is inversion of control, to understand about what is inversion of control, let us try to understand application development. Suppose, suppose I'm developing one small Java application. Suppose I'm developing some Java application. Let's say, for example, I'm developing one core Java application. One core Java application I want to create. Are you getting my point, right? I want to implement, for example, just I'm talking for example only. For example, I'm developing a small core Java application to simulate IPL auction. In IPL, player auctions are there, na? Not action, auction. Okay. Suppose to simulate like that, to simulate kind of IPL auction. Okay, right? I'm creating one small core Java application. I'm developing a core Java application to simulate what type of project? IPL auction. In that, I'm developing classes like player is one class, team is one class, auction is one class. Okay, and check whether this player is sold or not. If the player is not sold, then franchise is one more class. So I'm creating classes called what now? Player. Player is one class I'm developing. Next, team. Team is one class. Auction is one class. Franchise is one class. Right, okay? So I'm developing some kind of IPL kind of auction. Right? So player, team, auction, frame, franchise, etc. Like this, I'm going to develop some classes. I'm developing some methods. Okay. Are you getting my point now, right? So I'm developing some kind of IPL auction kind of code, multiple classes. It's a core Java application only I'm creating to simulate like that. My question, let's say for example, like this, I have created, let's say for example, I have created 10 classes. For example, how many classes I have created? 10 classes I have created to to simulate an application called IPL auction. I've developed 10 classes now. All the classes are ready. I've defined various methods, the different properties for the player, for the team, for the auction, for the franchise, blah, blah, blah. Finally, all the variables, methods, everything, around 10 classes I have created. Okay, 10 classes I have created. My question to you, I'm a developer, means I'm a programmer. As a programmer, how many classes I have developed with all the required operations? 10 classes I have created. So 10 classes I have created to conduct what type of, to simulate or to develop an application called what? IPL auction. I have created. Very good. Now coming to the point. As a programmer, I have created all the 10 classes. Okay. My question is my work is over now? Can I run this program now after creating the 10 classes? Ten classes I have created with all the methods, everything required. Now, can I run this application now after developing the 10 classes? Okay. Can I directly develop, can I run this application now? Classes I've created, all the 10 classes ready with all the methods, everything. Can I start executing this application? Can I run this application now? If I want to run the application, just classes are not enough. Suppose I have created two classes called class A and class B. Suppose I have created two classes called class A and class B. In class A, one method is there. In class B, some methods are there. Two classes I have created. Can I run this application now? If I execute the application, I won't get output anything. What should I do next? I have to create objects also. What I have to do? I have to create the objects. Did you guys understood now? Everybody is getting this point now. So tell me, as a programmer, if I write only classes, is it enough? No. No. After creating the classes required for the logic, next what you should do? Create objects. If it is a core Java application, then immediately you are going to create one main class. You are going to write main method, Java main method. In the main method, what are you doing?
Object.
Then you are start creating objects. What are you creating?
Objects.
You are creating objects. You are setting the values to the objects. Am I right or not? You are injecting one object to other object if required. All creating the objects, creating the objects. Okay. Injecting the dependencies. Okay. Your code is a very big code. Okay. And for example, you need to create multiple objects here. For example, one object work is over. Then you are going to destroy the object. How are you going to destroy the object? You are going to assign null value to that object so that garbage collector will recollect it. So only creating the classes is enough, or we also need to create the objects and we need to manage them. Suppose if I'm developing one application in core Java, only just writing the classes is enough? No. What are you going to do? First, you are going to create the classes. After creating the classes, then next you are going to create the objects. Okay. And for example, if one object depends on another object, for example, class A object is a dependent object, class B is its dependency object. Then tell me here, you need to inject the class B object to class A. Inject means what? By calling the setter method or constructor, whatever. You are going to inject the dependencies. Okay, right? Are you able to get my point now? Right. So try to understand the concept now. The point is, as a programmer, what are you doing? You are creating the classes. Or what are you doing? You are creating the classes. You are creating the classes. As a programmer, what are you doing? You are creating the classes. You are creating the classes. You are creating the classes. You are also creating what next? Objects. And of course, remaining total work, I am calling them as managing the objects. After creating the objects, what are you doing? Managing means what? Everything. Like injecting the dependencies, also managing only. Are you able to follow me now? So, as a programmer, suppose this is programmer. Tell me what this programmer is doing. This programmer is creating classes. This programmer only next creating the objects, and remaining total work I am calling them as this programmer only managing the objects. Now, did you understand now? What I am trying to tell now? This programmer only creating what? Classes, creating the objects, managing the objects. Who is taking care of all these things? Programmer. This is what you are doing in core Java. In all your core Java applications, okay, first you are writing all your classes. Next, at the last, you are getting main class also. Public class main you are writing. Inside the main class, public static void main method you are creating. Inside the main method, you are creating what? Objects only. You are creating objects only. Correct? You are creating objects only. Good. Come to the point. What I am trying to say now, as a programmer, okay, as a programmer has to create the classes, and the programmer has to create the objects, and the programmer has to manage them. All these things must be there in the project by programmer. I mean, all these things must be done by the programmer. Now, what inversion of control is? Programmer creates classes. What programmer will do? Creates classes with all the required variables, required methods, everything. With all everything. Means what? Programmer creates all the classes required for the project. Now, in the project, creating objects and then managing these objects. Creating the objects and managing these objects. These tasks are inverted. Okay, these tasks are inverted. The control is inverted to the another person, not the programmer now. The task is divided. Who is that other person? Framework. Or specifically we can say container. There is a word you are getting called framework or container. Now tell me, programmer should create what? Classes. If a programmer creates classes, who will take care of creating the objects and managing those objects? Managing means everything, injecting the dependencies, managing the life cycle of the objects, destroying them. So who will take care of all these things? The container or framework. So inverting these responsibilities. Okay, inverting these responsibilities to the framework or container. Nothing but now the programmer is inverting the control to the framework or container. Otherwise, who has to do all these things? Programmer has to do. Now tell me, in place of programmer, these responsibilities are taken care by framework or container. This is one more design principle. So previous one is what? Programmer only should create classes. Anyhow, definitely programmer only has to create the classes required for the project. That's for sure. Programmer only creating objects. Programmer only managing the objects. Previous one. This is one design principle of the application. Okay. Now take my IPL action. What happens in my IPL action according to this second design principle? I will develop 10. I have created 10 classes: player, team, franchise, okay, auction, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the classes, 10 classes required, I developed it with all the methods, everything as a programmer. Next, for these classes, creating the objects and managing the objects is taken care by the framework. Let's say Spring will take care of this. For example, Spring is a framework, right? Spring container. So these creating the objects and managing the objects is taken care by which person? Spring container. I will only develop what? Classes. As a programmer, I have developed all the classes with the required business logics, required variables, methods, everything. Then who is going to create the objects and managing these objects of my project now? Spring container. Now what is happening now? The control is inverted. The control is now inverted from where to where? Programmer to framework or the container. That's why the name is, this is one design principle. That's why there was a name given to the design principle: inversion of control. Inversion of control. So what is inversion of control? It is one design principle. Application design principle.
Design means new way.
It's not. Design is not a new way. Before we start the application development, first of all, we are going to complete the application design as part of SDLC, software development life cycle. Right? First application design, after that application development start, right? So design means how it should look like a blueprint kind of thing. So this is called one of the design principle. People call this design principle as one design pattern. The design principle is called one design pattern. Design pattern. Okay. Again, to explain what is a design pattern, it will take a lot of time for me. But in short way, I can tell you, design pattern is nothing but what? Design pattern is nothing but a best solution found for avoiding a reoccurring problem. A best solution which is identified to resolve or to avoid recursive problem. Recursive problem means if the same problem will repeat again and again in the application, it is going to be called as what problem? Recursive problem. The recursive problem means same problem will repeat again and again. That is called recursive problem, reoccurring problem. So if any best solution identified to avoid that recursive problem, then it is going to be called as design pattern. Design pattern. Okay. So we will stick our definition with the IOC only, because again, design pattern means again we need to discuss separately. So anyhow, so what is IOC? What is IOC now? Inversion of control. It is a design principle where
Objects are
where object creation, creating the objects and managing the objects is inverted from the programmer to the framework or container. Either framework or the container. Of course, in Spring framework, we have a Spring container. And this inversion of control is not a new thing for you. It is not a new thing for you. Those who knows about servlet technology. In the servlet technology also, servlet class, you are going to create a servlet class. By extending generic servlet class or HTTP servlet class, you are going to create one servlet class. You are creating one servlet class, but you are not creating its object. There is a servlet container in the Tomcat server. Which is called Catalina. What's the name? Catalina. This is one container which is provided by Tomcat server. In this is a container who will create object of the servlet class and who will manage that object. Which means inversion of control is not a new term to you. Term you are learning now. But if you are already aware of servlet technology, if you are aware of, otherwise no, but if you already know the servlet technology, then in servlet technology also, what you guys are going to do, you are going to create the servlet class, but you are not going to create the object. Programmer is only responsible for creating the servlet classes with all the required method, overriding, do, something with the logics and all. So servlet class you are going to write. Are able to follow me, right? Next, for this class, okay, there is a container. In the server, there is a container. It will create the object and it will manage the life cycle. It creates the object and manages the object. Manages the object means executes the life cycle. So tell me, this concept is also called as what concept only? IOC. IOC stands for inversion of control. IOC stands for what? Inversion of control. Inversion of control. Okay, right. So some part of IOC you already know. If you know about which technology, servlet technology. Otherwise, no, not required also. Okay. So what is IOC? IOC is one. IOC is one design principle. Design principle. Okay, right. So what is inverted here? See, creating the classes will be done by programmer only. If, for example, container or Spring only creating the classes of my project also, then what is the use of me? As a programmer, I am not required. Am I right or not? Able to follow me? So tell me, who creates the classes? Programmer only. But creating the objects and managing the objects is taken care by That is inverted from programmer to
I was a
framework or the container. Able to follow me? Now this design principle is called what? Inversion of control. Inversion of control. Because when you are creating a Spring application, we are going to create a lot of classes. For all the classes, objects are required. Where one object depends on another object, that depends on other object, that depends on another object, that depends on previous object. Like that, many dependencies will be there. Then tell me, who is taking care of creating the object and managing these objects? Spring container. Which means it is reducing the work on programmer. It's reducing the work on programmer. Are you getting my point now, right? So this is one of the reason like why Spring Framework got more popularity. What Spring Framework says, you only write classes. You develop the classes as a programmer. Remaining thing I will take care. Remaining things I will take care. What I will take care means I will create the objects whenever required, I will take care of creating the objects in the project. And also, if that object requires any other objects as a dependencies, I will inject you, don't worry. I will manage the objects, I will destroy the objects. Who will tell like that? Spring. This is called one design principle. What's the name of the design principle? IOC. IOC stands for inversion of control. So what's the definition of IOC? Inversion of control is a design principle where programmer is responsible for only creating the classes, and creating the objects and managing the objects will be inverted from the programmer to a framework or a container. This design principle is called IOC. IOC. In Spring Framework, who will take care of all these things, creating the objects and managing the objects? Spring container. That is called Spring IOC container. We call the word called what? Spring IOC container. Because IOC is a design principle and Spring container is following the design principle. That's why it is called Spring IOC container. IOC container, right? So first, let us try to understand, because these terms are very, very important. What are the terms I want to introduce here? One is called IOC. IOC stands for inversion of control. Next, we are going to, this is a design principle. This is one design principle. Are you able to follow me, right? Okay, good. Next, we are going to understand dependency injection. Dependency injection. Next, we are going to understand dependency lookup. So we are going to see how we can differentiate the dependency lookup and dependency injection. Okay. Understand the point clearly. Everyone, try to understand the concept. First, let us add the statement for what is IOC. We want to understand the word called what is IOC. What is inversion of control? What is inversion of control? Okay, I use I capital and C capital. What is inversion of control? Inversion of control is a very simple term. It is called design principle. What is inversion of control? So what's the inversion of control? First of all, inversion of control is it's a design principle, one of the design principles. I want to add a statement for this. Okay. So inversion of control is a design principle where the responsibilities of what and what? where the responsibilities of creating objects are where the responsibilities like what, creating the objects and managing the objects. Managing the objects means what? Creating the object, injecting the dependencies, and executing some life cycle of the object, destroying the object. That is called managing. So creating the objects and managing the objects. Okay, managing the objects are inverted. Okay, inverted from are inverted from the programmer to the framework or container. Any word, framework or container. Framework or a container. Okay, right. So it's a design principle where the responsibilities like creating the objects and managing the objects are inverted from the programmer to the framework or the container. So tell me, if IOC design principle is not implemented, then who is responsible for creating the objects? Programmer only. Programmer responsible for only creating classes now. Okay, here only the programmer responsible for developing the classes, and the remaining tasks like what and what? Creating the objects for the classes, managing those objects will be taken care by container or Spring framework, whatever it is. Okay, right. So I will write here the programmer is only responsible for developing the classes with the required functionalities. Developing the classes with the required functionalities. He is responsible for developing the classes with the required functionalities. Only responsible for developing the classes with the required functionalities. Okay. The objects creation and managing them, okay, will be taken care by a container, or a framework. Now this is called inversion of control. Okay, inversion of control. So if you want to add like a diagrammatic part, for example, now this guy is a programmer. Okay, let us add that this guy is a programmer. Okay, let's say this guy is a programmer. He is a developer. Developer or programmer, anything. He is a developer. Okay, right? Developer. Now you tell me what this developer has to do. Now what this developer has to do in an application. What are the responsibilities of this developer now? Now this developer has to do tasks. So what are the tasks this developer has to do now? He has to create the classes, and also has to create the objects, and also manage the objects. This developer has to, this is application, completely application I'm talking it. This is application. Okay, try to understand. This is application. Okay, done. This is one application. Tell me in this application what this developer has to do. No, this developer has to create the classes. He has to write the classes. Write the classes means what? Develop the classes. Okay, developers develop the classes. Okay, developer write the code, write the classes, otherwise better. Write the classes. Okay, the first one is okay, good. Tell me next, second. Write the classes, okay. Second, create the objects. Okay, of course, objects are created for the classes. So create the objects. Third point is what? He has to manage the objects. Third point is what? He has to manage the objects. So tell me, who should do all these things now? Developer only. Now tell me, this is by applying the IOC principle or without IOC? Without IOC. So I will add one heading called without IOC. Now let us add with IOC. With the IOC, inversion of control. Tell me, with IOC, now there are two people coming into picture. First one is a developer. He is a developer. Are able to get my point? Developer. Now, like developer, there is one more guy. There is one more guy. That one more guy is called what now? Container. Container or a framework. Container or a framework. Framework or container, whatever it is. I'm using container. Okay, container. Now you tell me, application is same application. This is application. This is application. This is application. Tell me now, in this application, what is a developer responsibility? Developer responsibility is only for writing the classes. Writing the classes. Developer responsibility is only going to write the classes. Write the code. Write the classes. Tell me, who will take care of creating the objects and managing the objects now? That is taken care by container. Now the work is inverted now. Some responsibilities are shifted from developer to the container. Very good. Because in real time, creating objects and managing them is also a difficult task. Create the objects and manage the objects. Now tell me, this is without IOC or with IOC? With IOC. So did you guys understood the diagram easily now? Okay, suppose without inversion of control design principle, developer has to write the classes, has to create the objects and manage them in the project, in the application. But with IOC design principle, developer only writes the classes, and who will take care of creating the objects and managing the objects? That is taken care by the container. Container or framework. This is called inversion of control. It is a design principle. Next. Okay, try to understand clearly. Let us add this diagram. Now I want to okay, so this is the diagram which is required for us in the, we'll keep it little bit short. Okay, you guys can easily understand this, right? Now we are done, so that we can move to next page. Now, did you guys got the difference? No? Do you got the difference called what is called inversion of control? Okay, these diagrams you can understand without inversion of control design principle, these are the developer responsibilities. But with IOC design principle, developer is only responsible for writing the classes. So now when you are going to write the Spring applications next onwards, from next onwards when you are writing the Spring applications, so tell me, are you going to create the objects and manage the objects? No. What are you going to do only? You are only going to write the classes. You are going to write your classes with all the required variables, methods, everything. But who is going to create the objects for your classes? Spring container. Spring container. And who will take care of your objects? Means managing them. Spring container will do that. Spring container will take care of that. We are not going to touch with creating objects, and we are not going to manage the objects. Spring will take care of it. Spring means Spring container will take care of it. Nothing but in Spring, we have a container called what type of container? IOC container. IOC container. Okay. Now this is okay. Good. Next, we are going to understand what is dependency injection. Okay. Good. See, who will take care of creating the objects and managing the objects? Who will take care of creating the objects and managing the objects in IOC? Container will take care of. Container. What as a programmer I will do? I will only develop the or write the classes, all the classes with the required variables, with the required methods, all the classes I'm going to create for my project, for my application, with all the required logics, means functionalities. But who is going to create objects now? Container. Who is going to manage the objects now? Container. Now, you understand the concept here. This IOC is a design principle. This IOC is a design principle. Try to understand. This IOC is a design principle which can be implemented with okay, two mechanisms. See, for example, this is one class. This is one class. Now we are calling this as which class now? Dependent class. I am calling this class as which class now? Dependency class. Tell me, who is developing this dependent class and dependency class? Programmer. Programmer is creating what classes? Dependent class and dependency class. All the classes, who is developing? Programmer only. This is a dependent class. This is a dependency class. Let's say this is one more class. It is some independent class. Independent class means what? It is not depending on any other class. It is called independent class now. So this is one independent class. This is one dependent class. This is one dependent. Like that, my application contains all the classes now. Independent classes, dependent classes. Next, dependency classes. My project is containing different types of classes. Who is responsible for creating all these classes? Developer. So I'm a programmer. Yes, I'm writing all the required variables, methods, everything. I'm ready. Then tell me, who is going to create objects for all these classes based on requirement? Container. So this guy is a container or a framework. Able to follow me, right? Very good. Now this container is responsible for creating the objects. Next, managing the objects. Understand? Now tell me, this is called which design principle? IOC. A small variation is there. If you catch that, then you can understand the difference between DI and DL. I'm going to talk both the things now. DL and DI. DI means dependency injection. DL means dependency lookup. Try to understand now. Are you able to get my point here? Right. Try to understand the concept clearly. Look at the concept clearly. So now this is called IOC design principle. This IOC is a design principle which can be implemented with two mechanisms. One of the mechanism is called what? Dependency injection. Other mechanism is what? Dependency lookup. Okay. What is dependency? What happens in dependency injection? This container creates the objects. This container only will inject the dependency object to the dependent object. Tell me what it is doing now?
Creating object.
It is not only creating the object, it is also going to inject the dependency objects. Who is taking care of that? Container. Okay, are you able to follow me now? Right. So tell me, this container I'm developing with a principle called what? Inversion of control principle. To implement IOC principle, I'm defining or I'm creating one container. Of course, Spring already created, but I'm talking about. For example, this is my own container. It's not a Spring container. I want to create my own container. It's my own container. It's not a Spring container. Let's say, for example, it is a Shaker container. It's a shaker container, not a spring container, shaker container. I am only creating container. Okay, right? So tell me in my container, how I'm writing the logic now? In my container, in my container development, what I did now? I will create the objects, and I will, of course, I will manage them. I will also do what? Inject the dependency, inject the dependency objects to the dependent object. And of course, I will manage all these objects. Okay, this is one way of implementing this IOC principle. Other way of IOC principle is what, I will create the objects, but when I'm developing my container, I am not creating my container in such a way that it is going to inject the dependency objects. It is going to create the objects and it's going to just manage them, but it is not going to inject the dependency object. Then this dependent object only. Okay, I'm creating the objects means what? I'm creating dependent object. I'm also creating dependency object. I'm also creating independent. All objects I'm creating. My container is creating all of them, but my container is not injecting the dependency object to the dependent object. Dependent object only has to look for its dependency object. Tell me in my container, what are available? This is my container. In my container, this is what object? Dependent class object. This is what object? Dependent. This is called what object? Independent class object. All objects created by my container is creating all of them. But my container is not injecting the dependency object to the dependent object. It is not injecting. This dependent object only has to search for its dependency object and it should get it. Are you able to follow me now? My container is creating objects. My container will manage the life cycle of objects. Everything will be taken care. But only one is missing. What is that? It is not injecting the dependency object to the dependent object. Like this also, IOC design principle can be implemented. Okay, so suppose if inversion of control design principle is implemented with this mechanism, it is called dependency lookup. Dependency lookup. Which means what? A dependent object is looking for its dependency objects or its dependencies and getting them. Are you able to follow me? Previous one is what? This dependent object is no need to look up for any dependency objects. Who will automatically inject them? The container only will inject this dependency object to the dependent object. Are you able to get my point now? Now this is called what type of mechanism it is called? Dependency injection. So tell me, IOC is a design principle and this principle can be implemented. This principle can be implemented. IOC principle can be implemented in how many mechanisms? Two mechanisms are there. One mechanism is called what? Dependency injection. Another mechanism is called what? Dependency lookup. So what is the difference between dependency injection, dependency lookup?
Dependency injection,
In dependency injection mechanism, what happens now? So dependency injection is one pattern of implementing this principle. Dependency lookup is what? Another pattern of implementing this design principle. That's why people call these two are design patterns. That's why people call them as what? Design patterns. This is one pattern, this is another pattern. Two different patterns are there, right? The first pattern is called what pattern? Dependency injection. Second pattern is called dependency lookup. Dependency lookup. When you come to Spring Framework, Spring Framework container we are developing or Spring Framework only provided? Framework only provided, we are using it in our project, that's it, okay, right? So in Spring Framework, the Spring Framework container is implemented with the dependency injection pattern. Spring container is created with which pattern? Dependency injection pattern. That's why people call Spring container also called as Spring dependency injection container, DI container. What we call, people call Spring DI container, DI container. Tell me what is going to happen in Spring now? Spring container will create the dependent object. Spring container will create the dependency object. Spring container will inject the dependency object to the who will take care of all these things? Spring. And Spring container creates independent objects also. So tell me, finally in Spring, we have a dependency lookup pattern or a dependency injection pattern? Dependency injection. Right. So IOC is a design principle. This principle can be implemented with how many mechanisms? Two mechanisms. One mechanism is called dependency injection mechanism. Second one is called dependency lookup mechanism. Both are also called as two patterns. In that, what Spring Framework will do? Spring container is implemented with which pattern? Dependency injection pattern. Dependency injection pattern. There are other examples for dependency lookup, but for that extensive Java knowledge is required for you. If I explain about what is called programmatic lookup, what is called contextual lookup, but I don't think so. Nobody is going to ask these kind of questions to you in the interview. Are you able to follow me? That's why I'm not going into much details of dependency lookup. Okay. Otherwise, we can write what is programmatic dependency lookup, what is contextual dependency lookup. PDL and CDL are the again two types. PDL, CDL. Okay, I can write the code, I can show everything, but it is totally going to be an unnecessary knowledge right now. At the time of EJB technology, this knowledge is required, but currently in Spring, it is not required. That's why I'm not going into much details of DL, just I'm explaining, that's it. Did you guys understood about what is a DI and what is a DL? So what is the difference between dependency injection, dependency lookup? These are questions I'm asking. Suppose you came for an interview and I'm asking this question to you. Then what is the answer you have to say? In dependency injection, I is there. In dependency lookup, L is there. Very good. Tell me, what is the answer to say? In dependency injection, the container only creates dependent object and the dependency object, and also injects the dependency object to the dependent object. Who will take care of all these things? By container. That is called dependency injection. In dependency lookup, the container creates dependent object and also creates the dependency class objects, but it will not inject the dependency object to the dependent object. Here, dependent object only has to look up for or search for the required dependency object. It has to search, but container doesn't inject automatically. That's the difference between what and what, DI and DL. These are the two mechanisms of implementing which design principle? IOC design principle. In Spring Framework, using which pattern the container is developed? Dependency injection. That's why Spring container is also called as DI container. DI means dependency injection container. Did you guys understood about the terminology today? These things are very important to catch the Spring next. Okay, so we got what is inversion of control. Okay, now we are going to understand what is a dependency lookup, and have explained what is dependency lookup and dependency injection. What is a dependency injection and a dependency lookup? This is a very important question in the interviews. Do you know what is the difference between dependency injection and dependency lookup. This is a question that is very, very popular question in the interview. So what is the answer? First of all, I want to write a statement related to this. Okay, I will write the statements. At the initial classes, more explanation is required to get the concept clearly. Tell me. Tell me. Okay, tell me. What is dependency injection? What is dependency and dependence lookup? First of all, what are these two? Dependency injection, and a dependency lookup are the two mechanisms. These are the two mechanisms to implement IOC design principle. IOC design principle. So we call them as design patterns. So we call them as what patterns? Design pattern. Two patterns. Okay, two patterns of this design principle. So design patterns. So tell me what is happening in dependence injection? In dependence injection, tell me what the container will do. The container or framework, anybody? What happens now? The container or framework, any word I can use. Tell me the container or framework creates the dependent object and dependency object. Just I'm writing object. Okay, single. Okay, creates the dependent object and dependency object. Now also, what it will do also? Injects the what object? Dependency object to the dependent object. Tell me, in a dependency lookup, what happens? In a dependency lookup, do you know what happens? The container or framework, what it will do? Creates the dependent object and dependency dependency object, but it doesn't inject the dependency object to the dependent object. So the dependent object only will search or look for its what object? Dependency object, and it will get it. Will look or search for dependency object, will get it. This is called DL, dependency lookup. Tell me in Spring Framework, the Spring container is implemented with which design pattern? Dependency injection. In Spring, the container is implemented or developed anything. The container is implemented with which design pattern? Dependency injection design pattern. Dependency injection design pattern. Okay, that is the thing that we discussed for today's class. So today you got 3 terms here. Tomorrow I'll give the diagrams, but 3 terms you got today. What are the 3 main terms? What is called inversion of control, and what is called dependency injection. Next, what is called dependency lookup. These things you got in the class for today. Okay, it's related diagrams I'll tell you tomorrow, but currently this is the discussion that we made for today. You learned very important things in the class today. Actually, these are all important questions for interview. What is IOC? Very important. What is dependency injection is very, very important. What is dependency lookup is also very, very important. So you are going to understand, you understood all these things in the today's class. Tomorrow I'll give you related diagrams, and then tomorrow we are going to see about who is that spring container. We have to know who is that spring container, who is that guy. We have to see that guy, spring container. Oh, correct. So I told already, and some other requirements to develop how to write the spring configuration file, which is called XML file. Okay, I'll tell you what is the meaning of spring configuration. XML is old way of doing the configuration, but at least for 1-2 examples, I'll talk about XML configuration. Next, after that, I'll tell you what is called constructor injection and what is called setter. Dependence injection, I told you just now. Okay, again in dependence injection, there are different types are there. How many types are there? 3 types. Types of dependence injection means 3 types. There is setter injection, constructor injection, interface injection. What are the 3 names now? Setter injection, constructor injection, interface injection. What are these 3? These are the 3 types of dependency injection. So we have to know that what is the meaning of setter injection, what is the meaning of constructor injection, and when to use constructor injection and when to use setter injection. We have to know in which situation which is good one. Are able to follow me, right? So we are not justifying that, or we are not giving 10 out of 10 marks for this and 0 out of 10 for other. Depends on requirement. Sometimes we must use constructor injection. Sometimes we must use setter injection. So, but we need to know when to use constructor, when to use setter injection. So this is called differentiation between what and what? Constructor and setter. So injections, dependence injections. These are all going to play very, very important role in the interview. We are going to discuss in further classes. Okay, I'll stop here. We'll continue tomorrow. Thank you. Online people, if you have any query, please let me know. Either in chat box or you can directly speak to me.